Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Perfect Building Maintenance, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Marks Paneth LLP, Ariel Property Advisors, Sterling National Bank, Capital One Bank, Collins Building Services, Meridian Capital Group. Additional support has been provided by grants from AVR Realty Company, Amerant Bank, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, B6 Real Estate Advisors, Briarwood Organization, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chase Commercial Mortgage, Citizens Bank, CPEX Real Estate Services, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handler Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate, Hodges Ward Elliott INC, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Matone Group, New Banks, Newmark Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Services, SJP Properties, Stonehenge NYC, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Merengoff Family Foundation, and these friends. Part 2, in celebration of the 90th birthday and close to 75 years in the real estate business, Allan V. Rose. So we were talking in Part 1 about the Bronx. That's where you met your first wife, okay? So from the Bronx, how do you end up in Westchester, which was the start, in reality, of your hotel career?
Well, coming from Brooklyn, they were like cave dwellers to me up there. They lived on hills. To go from Brooklyn to the Bronx in those days took 2 hours. It was like an impossible trip.
It was a different world.
It was a different world.
Okay, so
I didn't even know it was part of America for a while. But anyway, don't ask me why, but I fell in love with this lovely lady. She was a ballet dancer, and she was very pretty, and there was nothing wrong with her. She was fine.
So how do you, from the Bronx, you get to Westchester
so now,
with the legendary Howard Johnson?
Now, it started off, she wanted to have a house, and she didn't want to live in Long Island because the Bronx people think they're above Long Island, physically and mentally, but they're not. And we went looking for a house. And I take a ride up to this place called Lake Isle in Westchester. It was gorgeous. It was like a half hour from Manhattan. You think you were in the Adirondacks. I showed you those pictures. That's what it looked like. It was fantastic. But 3 or 4 builders had already gone bankrupt there because in building Westchester, it's almost all solid rock. And by the time they did the blasting, they were broke. So I really fell in love with the property. And I found a guy called Broccololo, who was the local excavator and blaster. And I sat down with him and I said, listen, I have a proposition for you. I can't afford to pay you for the blasting. So far, 4 guys in a row have gone broke. And he was the blaster on every one of those. Here's what we're going to do. You're not going to get paid more than a minimal amount of money for the blasting, but you're going to own 20% of this project. If you know who I am and what I can do, you'll know that you're going to make money. Well, he thought it over for a while. He said, let's do it. And we did. And he went and he blasted like crazy. I'm sure he lost a lot of money on the blasting. But what we did, which turned out to be very clever, the $25,000 houses, everybody in that project was coming from the Bronx. nobody came from Brooklyn to go to Westchester. They came from Brooklyn to go to Long Island. And we made the house, we doubled it. We made it 50,000, and we sold out the whole project in 1 year.
Right.
By doubling the price. And the houses on the lake, we went from 50,000 to 100,000.
So those were the homes.
And one other thing, it came out magnificent. Those houses on the lake, which we sold for 100,000, became worth 4 million many, many years later.
So today you own close to 50 hotels, right? So including the Roosevelt, which we'll talk about in a little while.
Correct.
But how did you get into the first hotel?
I was building what I thought was going to be a multifamily on 287 in Westchester, right near one of the exits, exit 4. And this guy comes riding up, this nice little normal kind of car, and he introduces us, give me the car. It was Howard D. Johnson, the originator of Howard Johnson's. And he was a wonderful guy, a little bit of a reprobate, liked to drink, liked to go out and have fun. We became very good friends.
Right. He heard about your escapades, the
Absolutely.
grossing this probably.
And he said, listen, you build it, lease it to me, and we'll pay you rent. So I said, what's the collateral? He said, well, we're going to put in all the furniture and fixtures. I said, that's great. If the hotel makes a lot of money, you're going to make all the money. And if it goes bad, I'll have all this crappy furniture that's going to be worth this. I'll tell you what, I was a very, very kind of cocky kid. And I said to him, I'm going to take a franchise from you, which is the way they did it in those days. And I'm going to build you the restaurant. We'll lease the restaurant to you, and we'll run the hotel ourselves. I had never run a hotel in my life. But then it dawned on me as I was doing, and the first hotel, it came out great. It looked beautiful. We won a prize for the best hojo in that year. And then I realized all those years when I was 14, 15, and 16 and working every summer in the hotels.
Gave you the training ground.
Some of it not only gave me background, like you say, training ground, but I found there was a love for the hotels in me someplace.
I mean,
the idea of doing it at that age, you can never realize you're going to be able to do something like that.
Let's talk about how you expanded, leaving the metropolitan area to go around the country. Why'd you do that?
Well, after a time, everything was getting so expensive here and overpriced and difficult to deal with towns who didn't want to give you building permits and banks that were having their own problems, very difficult to finance. And a guy in Louisiana, Sam Friedman, I call him the Jewish Cajun, got me involved in Louisiana. And we found out that the margins were better over there. The land, instead of being,
Was this for shopping centers?
No, originally we went down here to build homes and shopping centers. But at that point, we hadn't started with the hotels. But after we started with some hotels in Westchester, we started to build hotels in Louisiana, too.
So the initial start was with Sam.
And then I realized that there's so many better opportunities, and we wound up building in Pennsylvania and Maryland. Eventually, we built in 35 states.
How do you decide to take over, after Katrina, the Roosevelt Hotel?
You saw Katrina in the newspapers, but there was 5 feet of water in the streets. Every building, office building, had all the windows blown out. In this building, which every utility was gone, washed away. There were mice. It smelled to high heaven. It was just completely destroyed. They had all kinds of rodents running around over there. And everybody and his brother had looked at that property. It was owned by Istamar, the Dubai investment group. And they got their insurance after the storm. They got so nervous with the hurricane that they took the money, they ran back to Dubai. They don't want to do anything more in Louisiana. And as I'm walking through this property, I go by instinct. I sort of felt the hotel talking to me, saying, fix me up. This is a 100-year-old hotel at the time. Now it's almost 125. Sure enough, I just loved the bones of the building. There was a guy who was an engineer who was like a Phantom of the Opera guy. He lived in the building during the entire hurricane, and he preserved all of these magnificent chandeliers and mosaics and murals and irreplaceable things. And so we bought it. And then they made a big decision, and that was not to just renovate the building. It had been a Fairmont at that time, and they covered up this magnificent lobby.
It's now
magnificent.
the Roosevelt or Waldorf Astoria
Right,
Hotel.
Waldorf Astoria, Roosevelt. The first thing we did is take down all of that stupid covering that they did, and we restored the building to the way it was 100 years ago, including all the violations. They wouldn't even let me fix the violations. You know, they had steps there. Some areas that were 4 inches. Today you got to build an 8-inch step. But in any case, when we did this, it just came out magnificent. We still win a prize every year. This year we were voted #1 in the South.
Over a period of time, you had a hotel in Florida,
Right.
Howard Johnson, which is now a Courtyard by Marriott.
Right.
You're knocking that down and building a
85-story building, which will have 2 hotels. It's going to have a 5-star restaurant. It's going to have 500 rental apartments and 150 condos. That's a big, expensive building. The problem in Miami, it's either feast or famine. And right now, it's not the right time to start that. We got all the approvals. We're ready to go, but I'm waiting for an opportune time. I think in the next couple of years, we'll be able to start it.
So, you know, I spoke about that, and this you did a CD a number of years ago, Allan Rowe's Greatest Hits. But one of the things that you've always loved was singing.
Right.
And when did you buy the famous Brill Building, which has, you know, if you're talking about people
Right.
talking in the dark.
I
okay?
loved the Brill Building.
The
I
Brill
loved it. It was
Building.
like one of my kids.
Right, 1650 Broadway. When did you buy the Brill Building?
25 years ago, something like that. And the history of it, you know, you had Irving Berlin, every great songwriter and
Carole
musician in the
King,
world.
you know, Stacca, everybody.
Everybody. And they also had Saturday Night Live, you know, that show is produced in that building.
Right.
And Sound One, which is all the sound for major movies and things. You remember the old movies with the song pluggers? The guy comes out and drags him into, hey, listen to this, you know? You probably remember this guy. His name was George. He was partners with Stanley Diamond, who owned 2/3 of the building, and he owned 1/3. And they had an agreement, and Stanley Diamond died, and what the agreement said that as long as he got a certain amount of money for his Diamond's family, that he could decide who would buy the building. And I found out that his son, his thesis in Yale was the musical history of the Brill Building. So I didn't talk real estate to these guys for about, I don't know, months. We went out to clubs, we listened to good music, we had a lot of fun. And then when the time came, I didn't get any bargain. I paid what everybody else was. Trump looked at the building. Every big builder, Rudin, every big builder in New York wanted to buy that building. And sure enough, we bought it. But there came a time when I realized that the Brill Building, even though it's historic, is all crazy. The lobby was in the wrong place. The north wall, where Rockefeller Group owns a big piece of land next to it, as soon as they built, all those windows were going to disappear. And I don't know if you remember those days. It was kind of crazy. People were offering money that was nuts. We had paid like $20 million for the whole thing. Somebody offered us $50 million for the building. That's we're getting out. However, 6 months after that, the building went up another 25 and then another 20. But then when it came time recently to try to cash out of that building, they're ready to pay 20 now again. It went back to the value that it was because it's so obsolete.
How did you decide to buy 5 Times Square?
A couple of reasons. I don't think anybody knows this. You're the first. Is that in those days, the mortgaging was insane. We got a 90% mortgage. And if at the end of 10 years, we lost the building, we would have still saved so much money on taxes. It was tax shelter. That we wouldn't have gotten hurt at all. However, we made the building better, and we eventually sold it to David Warner.
David Warner.
And right now, I wouldn't want to own that building. Don't tell David I said that.
Okay,
because Times Square isn't what it used to be.
Okay, so let's talk about your return to Long Island, or should I say 25 years ago from the Breslin. You found the property in Yaphank, which we call the Boulevard. We have a big map of the picture.
Well, let's think about this. This is 2,100 acres, or it was when I bought it, right smack on the LIE at the intersection of the best north-south road.
Exit 67 or 68?
68, William Floyd Parkway. Now, William Floyd Parkway was built, the political stuff that goes on along. Originally, there was supposed to be a bridge going to Connecticut, and the approach to the bridge was on William Floyd Parkway. And, of course, all the politicians owned all the land. And, then, of course, they didn't build the bridge. So, anyway, it's a whole story. But the history of that property is there was a guy called Sidney M. Siegel who had an unbelievable, what would he call it, something city, Siegel City or something. So he went broke.
Freedom Land, like they did.
That was a Freedom Land there also. And then there was a guy called Grant who laid it out as a shopping center. To make a long story short, 5 different builders couldn't figure out what to do with this property. And by the time I got into the picture, Willie Breslin
right,
had put all this 2,100 acres together, and he was partners with a guy from Florida. This was being sold by Lehman Brothers. They foreclosed on the mortgage, and 2 days before they were going to sell it on the steps of the courthouse, I came in and I bought it. And I kept Willie in for a small piece, and I just looked at that. Where else could you find 2,100 acres of land on Long Island, on the Long Island Expressway?
Right.
It was insane.
And it's a major mixed-use project today.
Well, it wasn't at that time.
No, today. So
today it's a
let's fast forward to 2000.
Listen to this. It is the only mixed-use project where you don't interfere with each section. We have hotels that have their own parking. We have multifamily that has its own parking. The shopping center has its own parking.
Senior housing.
Senior housing has its own area. We built a park, a 7-acre park, with baseball fields.
And you have a super Walmart, a 200.
We have a 200,000 square foot Walmart. It's probably the largest Walmart in the East. And
let's talk about Sag Harbor. What did you do in Sag Harbor?
Well, when you go from Sag Harbor, there's a bridge, and just before the bridge is an area called North Haven. You probably know what I'm talking about. And it had bluffs overlooking Noyak Bay, Shelter Island Sound. It was magnificent. The only problem with it is that the board from North Haven, who met over the bank in Sag Harbor, never approved anything. They just didn't want anything and turned down every kind of reasonable thing. And I was fighting with them for years, 4, 5, 6 years. And I said to the guy, this is how I figured this out. Who's the best environmental engineers in the world? And they all said that there was a company in Philadelphia called Collins Dutat, who were the #1 people. I said, listen, I'm going to spend whatever it costs to make the most advanced, environmentally sound layout. But you have to tell me now in front of all of these people that you're going to give it serious consideration. I don't need anything in writing. You just tell me in front of everybody. All we want is a fair shake. That if this is a good plan, you get taxes out of it, we get a layout out of it, we're not going to sweat the property. And sure enough, that's what we did. We went to Collins Dutat, and they came up with a plan that was magnificent. 133 plots, big plots, 2-3 acres, all on Noyak Bay and so what happened? We got the approvals, but I realized that they were going to just break my chops from then on. So I traded that property into 711 Stewart Avenue. That's how I got 711 Stewart
Where you
Avenue.
built a office
A
building,
huge,
Stewart Avenue.
yeah, Stewart Avenue. And but if you want to talk about one of the stupid deals of all time, today those lots are worth, the ones right on the water, are worth $10 million each. And they have houses that are worth $25-30 million.
Timing is everything.
You can't win them all, right?
Let's talk about Fishkill, New York.
Okay. In 1980, you know, when Reagan put in his famous, what the hell was it called? The tax simplification plan. He bankrupted every savings and loan in the United States and 75% of the builders. And the Marine Midland, who was based in Buffalo, had three major pieces of land. They had Fishkill, they had a huge piece of land in New Windsor, and they had one up at Kingston, right on the river. We bought all three pieces of land for $1 million each. You're talking about 1,000 acres of land. Nobody wanted it. Nobody even wanted to pay the taxes. And we bought it, stuck our neck at it in those days. And obviously, we designed it good. We got them all approved. We built thousands of houses on this land. We built a shopping center on this land. And it all came out magnificent.
So at the tender age of 90, what are you building today? Yaphank is...
Well, I'm going to tell you what we're building today. We have 4 or 5 hotels that we're building all over the country. We have this Yaphank project, which is eventually going to be like a $4 billion project. We're adding on to all of our Fishkills and all those other things. We're building a big thing for Northwell in Massapequa,
Northwell Health?
The health group, right? And we're building in California. Don't ask me why. Frankly, I love building. I always fell in love with the business. We probably give away almost as much as we make, but I want to be in action.
Let's talk about family.
Right.
You have 4 daughters.
4 beautiful daughters. I love them all dearly.
Can you tell me their names?
Yes. My 2 biggest daughters, my oldest daughter's name is Brianna. And there's a cute story with that. I call her up in California, and the phone rings, and she says, "This is Brianna, formerly Leslie." I said, "Well, this is Arthur, your father, formerly Allan. Call me back."
Right.
And then Patty is my second daughter, who's brilliant. And then my third daughter is Marissa, that has the 2 beautiful grandchildren. And my fourth daughter is Frankie. Frankie is a star athlete.
Right, she's a...
straight A student at Country Day School.
Riverdale
Country Day School.
And tell the story, and I think it's really appropriate, the story about her bas mitzvah with the Torahs.
Oh, we did speak about the hotel in New Orleans.
Right.
Yeah. And the lobby is you saw the pictures of the lobby. Probably the best lobby in the country. And she said to me one day, "You heard of Eloise at the Plaza?" I said, "Sure, everybody heard of Eloise at the Plaza." She said, "Well, I want to be Frankie of the Roosevelt." I said, "Okay."
So
we have her picture right over the concierge thing. It says Frankie of the Roosevelt.
But tell me the story about the Torahs, because...
Oh, the Torahs. So Katrina wiped out this shul. It's another temple, Emmanuel, and in years they couldn't raise enough money. It was kind of poor people there, nice people, lovely people. The rabbi was great.
So you had no...
And I asked her when she was 13, "What would you like for your bar mitzvah?" And she said to me, "You know, what does she do when she goes there? She goes down to the 9th Ward to try to help out, and take some of the people from the hotel, and they rebuild, or they fix houses, and somehow she found out about this shul, and she said there's a whole congregation that has no Torah. For my birthday, just give them a Torah.
Right. And her mother is, what's her name?
Maxine. Great looking girls.
No question. So let's talk briefly about singing.
Okay.
How come you did the CD?
Well, my mother loved to sing, dance, and she used to play the drums on pots and pans. And I used to take her to Mickey's house. We used to have parties, and they always bring out the pots and pans, and she'd drum away and sing. And we never had any money, but all we had was fun in the house. Sometimes we didn't even have food, but we had music. And from that beginning, I got involved in music.
I said to you what you're going to do in the next 20 years of your life.
Right.
Part of it is a book that you and I have discussed.
The book is almost finished, believe it or not.
Right. What's the book going to be called? My Way? The same way as the last song of...
I don't know. I have a few ideas. Maybe you can help me. One title was The Kid from Brooklyn. And
I think the title is My Friend Allan Rose. A story of a great businessman and interesting individual.
Thank you.
Humanitarian, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Lucky to know you.
You know, you and I know each other a long time, and it's always been a pleasure.
Great. Thanks.
Much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did